Okay, our next speaker is Rafael Ördög from a company called Emersys. He will be talking about one of the main pain points of, I think, most managers in the IT industry today, and that is the hiring process, and why it's broken and how to fix it.
Yeah. So, hi everyone. This is obviously somewhat a clickbait title, but the thing is here. If we look at our industry, there was research by PayScale just a few years ago, and it turns out that the median tenure of a software developer is 1 year, one single year. We hire someone, and on average, in a single year, they are gone from our company. Compare that to what Kodak has, or what Kodak had in the old days, 20 years. The median tenure at Kodak was 20 years, and yet we have 1 year. How could that be? And that actually comes with a pretty high turnover rate of 15%. So every year, 15% of your developers are gone from the company. Again, this is a pretty high number, right? So that's kind of worrying, and we were thinking how to fix it because we had the same problem at Masters when we got started. Actually, our numbers were even worse because at some point we had to lay down about 20% of our people in a single go because they were underperforming. So that was clearly a hiring problem. Now, the important thing is that that hiring developers is not the entire solution, right? So if you fix your hiring process, you may still have some turnover rate that is non-zero. But it's certainly a large part of the thing. And once we decided about 4 or 5 years ago to change our hiring process to something that actually worked for us, our turnover rate has become pretty low. It's around 5% right now, and our median tenure is pretty interesting because if you look at people who have been here for 3 years at the company, and look at how many of them are still here, almost all of them. So we have kind of fixed the hiring part. Now the important thing is I don't want you to copy us, like do exactly what we do, because copying other hiring processes is not good. One of the most popular processes I have seen around are basically copies of the Google hiring process, which might work for Google, although I'm not sure. They have worked on it, and probably it's the best they could come up with for their own problem, right? But it's not necessarily the best solution for you, especially because Google has very different problems from what other IT companies have. They have a huge system with billions of users. It's a different problem space than for smaller companies with much less users. So even if someone has come up with a really good solution, probably you want to find your own. Now, what I'm going to tell you about is what our original process was, how we changed it, and then I'm going to tell you how you can do it on your own by not just copying whatever we have done, although you might find some good ideas in our changes. So what's the goal of hiring? How do we want to, what is what we expect from a hiring process, right? For me, I have a definition here, or that I came up with. Find the talents that add to your team. Find those people who will make your company go faster, right? And by that, I don't just mean in technical skills, but also culturally. Every company has its own culture, and it's really important to take that into account. And I don't just mean hiring people that are culture fit. I also mean that hire people who might shift your culture in the right direction, because that is also important. You don't want to end up with a monoculture where every developer is like the same in terms of their thoughts and the way they work. Okay, so that's about it. Let's look at our original process. Well, our original process was somewhat simple, similar to what Google has, although a lot less. We didn't have as many interviews. But the first thing we did, of course, was look at the CV. And you get a few A4 paper pages with the things that person thinks are important about him or her. Okay. And what do you find out about, from the CV? First of all, basically nothing, because as Dr. House has always said, everybody lies. So with websites all around the web that tell you how to make a good CV, you can go figure how many of those CVs are actually right. So, and there is another problem. Here is one way to go about reviewing CVs. You have a pile of CVs, and you take like the top half and throw it in the trash bin, because we don't hire unlucky people. Okay, that's obviously a stupid process, right? You wouldn't do that. Now, the thing is, this is at least a fair process, because everyone has the same chance, right? Now, what's not a fair process? You look at the CV, and what do you see on it? Well, in many cases, you will see a photograph. What does it tell you? The person's gender, age, race. All of these are like super relevant, right? You look at it, oh, finally a girl, let's hire her. That's not a good way to go about it, right? And by the way, I'm all for diversity, but I don't want people to just hire someone because they are a girl, because that's actually hurting the female developer community. And by the way, I'm really glad to see so many ladies around. That's great. I mean, increasing diversity is great. Yeah, but let's not do it the wrong way. And the same with age. Someone might be really old and be an amazing developer, or really young and still be an amazing developer. And the thing is that it goes both ways, right? Some people will be biased against old people, some other people will be biased against young people, which is neither is good. So that's not good. And we are just at the photo, right? Then we get to the name of the person. If you find a name that is that you recognize, maybe you have some bad experience with the name. Maybe your prime minister had the same name. That actually happened to me, by the way. One of my colleagues has the same surname as our prime minister, and he's laughing right in the back. And so when I saw his CV at the time, we were still looking at CVs. I was like, oh my God, he's probably a relative of that guy. He's not. Anyway, so you don't want to have that biases either. Then you look at the previous workplaces, right? What do you find out from that? Well, if that's a big company, then you might have like an idea of that company. Is it a good company or a bad company? Maybe they had a scandal just a few months back, and then you feel like, okay, these guys don't know what they are doing, because they had just a big security leak, right? So that's also not good, because big companies are not homogeneous, right? There are some bad developers there, so there are some good developers. You find nothing out from a name of the company. And if it's a small company, you don't even know. So again, not relevant. How about schools? Well, if they went to the same university as you did, you might have a bias for them. But is it really important? Is it really important where that person was drinking every night? Because university is sometimes just that, right? I think that whatever we know is mostly up to us. And yes, university can help you find out what to learn, but in the end of the day, you have to learn it yourself. So that doesn't count that much either. So for me, I am yet to see any relevant information in a CV. And that's why I don't really think it's a good idea to look at the CV. Now, here's the thing. You might still decide to look for some obvious red flags. So one obvious red flag would be if the person was moving from company to company every 3 months, right? That sounds like an obvious red flag. But here's the thing. I can actually come up with a situation where that's not a red flag. For example, that person wasn't moving from company to company, but the company was renamed 3 times. And that happens. Companies get acquired. And until you ask, why have you been working at so many companies within 2 years, you don't know if that's the situation or not. So my advice is, don't look at the CV, just talk to the person. And when you are already talking to the person, then it's a good time to look at the CV and maybe ask these kind of questions. But a CV on its own is not really useful. That's my claim. But I'm happy to argue with anyone about that, because I really want to see something that's valuable in a CV. Okay, so what's the next step? Well, our next step was a technical interview, which started by coding on a whiteboard. Coding on a whiteboard then was like an algorithmic problem, right? So here's my problem with that. Can you imagine a company where you come in the morning and then, okay, let's do a stand-up. We stand around the whiteboard and we start coding a binary tree on the whiteboard. Because I don't know, the cleaning lady has cleaned it overnight and we have to code the thing every day. No, that's not what you do. That's not what happens at a real company. And I mean, there is a huge difference between coding on a whiteboard and between coding in an IDE. If someone is coding in an IDE, you won't find out how they use the IDE. If someone codes on a whiteboard, you won't find out if they use the IDE well, if they realize that there is a syntax error, and the IDE even tells about that. So honestly, and also like for us, we work in test-driven development. Who does the test-driven development? Hands up. Okay. Way less people than I hoped. So if you do test-driven development, that's a completely different attitude from writing a code top to bottom, right? Then you want to do iterative processes, and someone who is horrible at coding at a whiteboard but might be really good at doing TDD. Take me, for example. I actually have to practice for that kind of interview to go well, because I do TDD all the time, and it's a completely different mindset. So yeah, what we came up with instead of whiteboard coding is that now we just send a homework. A very simple problem that we actually came across during our work, and people need to complete that at home, and then we decide if we want to talk about that. But I will come back to later when we talk about our current process. But at the time when we changed it, that was our original version, coding on the whiteboard. And then we asked about lexical knowledge, like things like, do you know what dispatcher design pattern means? And then some people knew it, some people didn't, and the only thing you find out is if that person has already heard about something and looked it up or not. But if someone just didn't hear about it, because by the way, they are really good developers, they might even use the pattern, just don't know the name, then you don't find out anything about that person. So yeah, and after that, we hired someone if we thought that they did a good job on an interview, and I'm pretty sure we lost many good candidates to this process. And at the same time, we hired some people who, even after 3 days, we could see that they are underperforming. And that's a problem. This is a very noisy process, and I'm sorry, but if that's all the best we could do, that's not enough, right? We want to hire people who we want to work with for years. So how we fixed our process? Well, the idea was to kind of come up with the issues, right? Find out what are the competencies that we expected people to have. We didn't test, and then we iterated on the process for a few times, and after about a year, we had things worked out pretty well. So I already said that we don't really look at CVs anymore. We do look at some red flags, which I don't agree with, but hey, I mean, those red flags that we are looking for, probably 99% of those people who we reject just based on the CV wouldn't go through the interview process anyways. We do lose that 1% though. So that's, I'm not sure if, yeah, it's a trade-off, right? Everything is a trade-off. This is a trade-off as well. But even if you do look at the CV, yeah, and one more important thing, we developers do not look at the CV before the interview. It's only HR, and they are trained on what to look for, right? So that we don't end up with this kind of biases that we don't want to end up with. So once we accepted the CV, which is like most of them, like over 90% of the CVs, we are going to just invite the person in for first the homework, which I already told you about. It's a simple coding task. People have one day to complete it, and then they can send it back. Now, of course, there are obvious reasons why you shouldn't make conclusions on a homework. First of all, it might not be the person who did it. Since it's a homework, we cannot check if it was really done by the candidate. But it's not really important for reasons that I'm gonna come back to within a second. And the other thing is that there are some weird things that you might experience. So the thing is this: when someone is completing a homework, they wanna do their best, right? And sometimes they just want to impress you. And when they do that, they sometimes overcomplicate things. That's one of the things that happens many times. That we have a homework that you can solve in like 3 or 4 lines of code. Okay, not much. If you know what you want to do, it's 3 or 4 lines of code. And then we get homeworks with hundreds of lines of code. It's obviously overcomplicated, but the thing is that some people just want to show that, oh, I know what is an MVC pattern, and oh, I know that I should organize things in classes and in methods, and they might be amazing developers. They just want to impress you, so look out for that. Another thing that you really need to look out for is enforcing your own internal best practices, because one company's best practice is another one's kryptonite. Just to give you one example, how many of you thinks that commenting in the code is good? Okay, few of you. How many of you thinks that it's bad? Okay, about the same amount of people, right? And the thing is, I am on the no commenting side of the argument, but that's not the point, right? Someone might be working at a company where commenting is like they are expected to write comments, and if they want to impress you, they will write a lot of comment if they come from that culture. But once you talk to them and they are on the interview and you ask, why did you make so many comments, you might find out that they actually think that it's good because they are coming from the culture. And then when you ask them, hey, and can you give me reasons why not to write comments, they might come up with why you don't like that. And then you can actually talk about that and find out if they are willing to change their practices. So that's also important. And yeah, one more thing that I didn't say at the beginning is that what I'm looking for is not necessarily who is a good fit right now. What I'm looking for is who is going to be a good fit after working 2 or 3 months at the company. And that's a very important difference, because because if you think about it, let's go by a very exaggerated example. Let's think about a minority, someone coming from a minority who is also a lady, and was all her life was told not to go into IT. And then at 25 years old, they decide that they are going to change their life around and become a developer. And then what you are looking for is basically, okay, this person is, although she is 26 years old, but despite all the discouragement she received, within 1 year, this is how far she got. Oh my God, this person is smart. I want to hire her, even if she knows much less than another candidate I had who reached further over a longer time. Okay, so that's really important. Yeah, so that's the homework. And my personal opinion is that you shouldn't Again, you shouldn't filter too many people on based on the homework because it's still noisy, but it's a great way to get rid of the whiteboard coding part. Because what you do is you bring in your laptop to the oral interview and just show them the code. And one of my favorite questions, what will you change about your code? You look back, I mean, every developer after 2 or 3 days could improve something on their code, right? And that's one of my favorite questions. And most of the time, I find out that the person sitting right in front of me is actually finds out what are the things that I didn't like about their codes to begin with, which is a really interesting thing. Then we just go on to discuss previous experience, and basically what we do. I'm not going to talk about this in detail, but we are doing competency-based questions. Look it up, competency-based questions. This is an approach to interviewing people. And the reason I don't talk about it is because it's very documented. Yeah, and after that, so far we had a check on the CV, which we didn't filter many people out there. With the homework, didn't filter out many people there. But with the interview, that's the first step where we want to actually filter people out, because the last step that we have is going to be really expensive, both in terms of the company, both for the company and both for the candidate. Because what we ask people to do is coming to work with us for 3 days. And we are actually paying for the 3 days. But the thing is that what we realized that even the not so good hires that we had, even after 3 days, we could figure out that maybe we made a mistake. And because of that, just bringing in that person to the company, it goes a long way to reducing your noise within the process. Now, there's a question though: are people going to go with that, or are some candidates going to say, "Oh no, I'm not going to do that. I can't go there for 3 days because I have to take vacations and whatnot." The thing is, over the 4 years that we have been doing this, only 2 candidates said that. Only 2. Everyone else was like, "Oh, great! I can check out the company before I go there." So that actually is beneficial for both sides, both the company, because we actually get a really good glimpse of who we are hiring, and both the candidate, because they actually find out where they are going to work. They find out what kind of desk they will have, what kind of computer they will have, who are going to be their teammates, all that kind of stuff, which actually matters to people, right? Especially if you as a company, I mean, most companies right now are trying to make it so that developers feel at home in the office, right? So you want to show that off. You want to show off the free drinks and the free whatnot if you want to convince a developer to change their jobs. One of the important things about this step is that we actually put the person into a team, and everyone in the team will pair code with that person, and we also will ask them to work alone for a while. And we usually give them just part of the current project, or if we cannot do that, then try to find a well isolated part that they can work on. It's important to make sure that they can understand the problem within the first 3 or 4 hours of their time. Yeah, so that's our assessment days. And finally, we have to make a decision, and making the decision is also very important to be a team effort. So this is usually completely democratic. Officially, the team lead has the final say. The reason I'm saying officially is because most of the time, if not all of the time, it's a decision made by the entire team, and everyone has to say yes. If someone says no, unless everyone else is like really convinced that they want to work with that person, then the answer is probably going to be no. So this is the democratic process, and the other important thing is how we decide who is a good candidate and who is not. And here's where company values become really important. And you should have company values that are not just HR bullshit. Too many companies have company values that someone in HR came up with and are mostly just an advertisement to the world that these are our values as a company. But when you are talking about internal values, those values have to represent what you expect from the person who is working for your company. All right. So in our case, those we have 4 values: passion, impact, communication, judgment. Everyone knows those 4 values because we talk about those values so much within the company, and those values are actually guiding our decisions, and it's also guiding our decisions regarding the people, because whenever we are after the assessment days, we have a meeting, and those are the 4 questions we ask. Does this person has passion? Did he communicate, or did she communicate well? Does this person had an impact? And did he make good judgment calls, or did she make good judgment calls? Right. So this is very important because that sets up expectations neatly. All right. So that's kind of all I wanted to say about this topic. Just to sum it up, our new process is basically just look for obvious red flags in the CV, or even not that. Then send out a homework for the people, and they have to come back with that within 24 hours. Take a look at it. If it's obviously horrible, then you might not want to do an interview. But I personally think that it's not good to weed out too many candidates at that point. Then do an interview, and at the interview talk about the homework, go into details, ask them why they did what they did. Especially if you don't like something, ask why they did it that way. Maybe you will find out that why, and maybe they have a good reasons to do that. And finally, the assessment days, which I think by far the most important innovation in our process, because it gives both the company an amazing opportunity to just learn a lot about that candidate, and also the candidate has an amazing opportunity to find out if that is the company they want to work for. Thank you so much.